only thing we have to fear is
in war.
Fear itself.
There is no substitute for victory.
Let us never negotiate out of fear.
We stand undivided, forever united, fighting hand in hand for the liberty we've earned, for glory and honor, for our sons and daughters, ever mindful of the lessons we've learned. Let the torch of freedom burn.
Thomas Jefferson said, "The Constitution of most of our states and of the United States assert that all power is inherent in the people, that they may exercise it by themselves, that it is their right and duty to be at all times armed, that they are entitled to freedom of person, freedom of religion, freedom of property, and freedom of press."
Welcome to WallBuilders Live. It's Foundations of Freedom Thursday. You can learn more about our program at wallbuilderslive.com and wallbuilders.com. And every Thursday, we're doing programs about the foundations of America. We're taking your questions and talking about those principles. A lot of constitutional application. Also, we dive into the, many times, years and years before the Constitution and the Declaration, where those ideas came from, the sermons, all kinds of great stuff covered on Foundations of Freedom Thursday. Really been enjoying these programs, David, enjoying the questions we're getting from folks. But I just feel like I learn so much every week when we talk about these things.
You know, we often give tours of our library and museum here because we've got these 100,000 documents from before 1812. And so folks are coming through all the time. We're giving them tours. And if I'm around giving the tours, and a lot of times I'm not, I'm traveling, but other folks in the office give the tours, and the folks who run the library and the museum give the tours. And so we get these folks doing it. And sometimes people say, you know, what's the most fun about what you do here? And the answer to that is really kind of unusual. And by the way, let me say, of those 100,000 documents we have in that library, we estimate that we have been through maybe 5% of those documents. There's that much left that we haven't been able to get through yet. Some of them are massively long. There's books that are 1,000 pages, etc. And it just takes a while to get through them. But what is the most fun for me is we get calls regularly from governors or senators or mayors or judges or legal groups saying, hey, did the Founding Fathers have a view on whatever it is? And quite frankly, we often say, don't know.
Let me get back to you on that one.
Yeah. And I remember I got a call one time, and it was back 5 years ago when they were doing the TARP and the stimulus bailout kind of stuff. And I got a call from 3 members of Congress who were on the floor in the middle of debates. You get debates going in the background. They said, look, here's the deal. We're debating now whether the federal government should bail out private businesses that are too big to fail. Would the Founding Fathers have had an opinion on that? I don't have a clue. And we looked up and it turned out they did. 1792, you had James Madison, who led a debate that federal government has no business bailing out private businesses that are considered to be too big to fail. And so some of the most fun I have is getting questions from folks who raise things that really hadn't thought about before, and you go, that's really good stuff. And that's the way it's been on these Thursdays. I mean, we get so many cool questions, so many good questions, so many questions that make us think and make us have to go back and search and dig and let us express things in ways that maybe we hadn't addressed before. And it's a lot of fun. These questions are really a lot of fun.
Well, let's jump right into them then. We've got several we're going to try to get to today. This one comes from Dean. Says he's having trouble finding something in the Constitution that says legislators have the power to make laws governing the people. He says all he sees is the power to tax for numerous reasons like funding the military and such, but nothing giving them the power over we the people. And he asked, what is he not seeing? So does the Constitution give government any power? I don't even know if the right phrase is over the people, but certainly power that affects the people directly.
Yes, it does. And the Constitution lists those areas. There are specifically, it's called the enumerated powers doctrine, but the Constitution enumerates powers where the Congress has the right to make laws. And when they make laws, those laws govern the nation, which means the people. Article 6 of the Constitution is called the Supremacy Clause. Any federal law made in these enumerated powers, it trumps all of the laws. It trumps state laws, it trumps treaties, it trumps everything. So these federal laws are above everything, which means they're above the nation, which means they're above the people, but that's only because the people gave Congress the ability to make laws in these areas through the Constitution. So what's happened is the people have said, hey, we the people are the authority, but we're allowing you to be the authority in these, as it turns out, there are 17 areas where the people specifically told the federal government through the Constitution, you have the right to make laws that govern us in these areas. You can regulate us in these areas. So, yes, the Constitution does do that. There are many areas where the Congress is empowered. Taxes is one of them. The aspect of taxing the people, that's one of them. But there are other areas as well. But there's 17 listed in the Constitution.
So we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, David, let's talk about, when we say power over the people or power that's going to affect the people, that doesn't necessarily mean micromanage. You're saying it's limited then, that government power is limited to 17 things, and anything outside of that, they haven't been given the power to do, if I'm understanding you right. That's my question for you when we come back. Stay with us, folks. You're listening to WallBuilders Live. It's Foundations of Freedom Thursday.
Calvin Coolidge said, "The more I study the Constitution, the more I realize that no other document devised by the hand of man has brought so much progress and happiness to humanity. To live under the American Constitution is the greatest political privilege that was ever accorded to the human race."
This is David Barton with another moment from America's history. Since the Ten Commandments have formed the basis of civil law in the Western world for over 2,000 years, an individual is more likely to find a copy of them in a government building rather than a religious one. Yet amazingly, numerous rulings over recent years now make it unconstitutional to display the commandments in many public arenas. Consider what Founding Father John Adams said about this. He declared, "The moment the idea is admitted into society that property is not as sacred as the laws of God, anarchy and tyranny commence. If 'thou shalt not covet' and 'thou shalt not steal' were not commandments of heaven, they must be made inviolable precepts in every society before it can be civilized or made free." John Adams believed that no society could remain civilized if separated from the Ten Commandments.
For more information on God's hand in American history, contact WallBuilders at 1-800-8-REBUILD.
Let the torch of freedom burn.
George Washington. The Constitution approaches nearer to perfection than any other government hitherto instituted among men.
Welcome back to WallBuilders Live. I like that, near to perfection. So we're not saying it's perfect, but it is the closest thing that we've ever seen in a government here on Earth, and some incredibly, what's the word I'm looking for, long-lasting principles. The things they put in place, David, you've talked about, this is the longest living. We break the record every year, right, that we get to live under these things. So we must have done a pretty good job back then, as we the people, giving government these certain powers or loaning it to them. But as I said before the break, is it then, you mentioned 17 things, so does that mean we didn't give them blanket power? We didn't make them dictators.
No, we didn't make them dictators. We, the people, we are the power. That's what it says up top. Now, of course, the Declaration had made clear that God is the power, and under that, God has given power to the people, both individually and collectively, and the people can then cede part of that power. For example, God gives to parents the duty and responsibility to raise their kids and educate their kids. Now, if the parents want to cede some of that power to a school district, they can do that. It's called in loco parentis, in place of the parents. And the way it had always worked was, hey, school district, you believe the same thing we as parents do, so we're going to let you instruct our kids in math or in science or in PE or whatever. We're still the parents, and you're just helping assist us accomplish this goal. Now it's become a replacement. Schools have become a replacement for the parents. It's not in loco parentis. They teach values completely different from what the parents have. They try to separate parents out of education in so many ways. So it's not what it used to be, but that was the plan. God is the first authority. Below that, he has then put individuals and collective groups of individuals, so that individual could be in a family, that individual could be in the government, that individual could be in the church, but he gave jurisdictions to everyone. That's what we're talking about here, is jurisdictions. There are things that are right for the family to do that the government's not supposed to do. There are things that are right for the government to do that the church is not supposed to do. There are things that are right for the church to do that it's not the role of the government to do. There's jurisdictions. So whenever you look at something, for example, in the Bible, and it says do this, it says feed the poor. All right, feed the poor. What jurisdiction is it? Was he talking to government when he said that? Was he talking to the church? Was he talking to the family or to the individual? And one of the things that people do all the time is they read commands and they don't see what jurisdiction is pertaining to. And that's what happens to the U.S. Constitution. U.S. Constitution pertains to the federal government. And what the founders did was they said, all right, we the people are going to let you mess with these 17 areas. We give you jurisdiction in these 17. And in these 17, you get to say the word. But outside of that, you don't. And so, for example, when you look in the Constitution, there is nothing there about police powers. Police, that's a local and a state matter. There's nothing there about educational powers. That is a local and a state matter. It's a parental matter as well. So you look at all the things that are not, if it's not listed in the Constitution, then we the people did not give the federal government the authority to do that. But there are 17 things that are listed, and some of them are fairly expansive. I mean, when you get into regulating the military and regulating the militias, every state has a militia, and it used to be that everybody who was 18 years and older was part of the state militia. So the federal government, by the Constitution, gets to set the rules and laws to govern the militias. And that meant everybody over the age of 18. So, yeah, there they are making laws. They're making laws on training. They're making laws on knowledge. They're making laws on operations and other things. So, yeah, that's part of it. The Constitution also says that the Congress is to regulate commerce among the several states. When you talk about states, you're talking about the people in those states. So regulating commerce between the states to make sure that California can't keep things from North Carolina from coming to California, and that Texas can't keep things from Kansas from coming to Texas. Congress gets to regulate the commerce so there's a free flow of commerce between all the states. There's just a lot of the areas, and particularly the latter two areas is where the people gave Congress probably more power than in any other area. And the last two were added by constitutional amendment. And that is the 13th Amendment and the 14th Amendment. 13th Amendment abolished slavery, which is fine. That was not necessarily an expansive amendment, but because there were so many racists across the nation, a lot in the South, some in the North, these racists said, well, you know, these blacks may be free, but we're not letting them have our constitutional rights that we enjoy in the state. So blacks don't have a right to marry. They don't have a right to defend themselves. They cannot keep and bear arms. They have no right to education. They cannot serve on juries. They cannot vote. And so the people said that's wrong. And so the 14th Amendment came through and said, all right, whatever the rights are that you have in your state, everybody in that state gets those rights, and the federal government can enforce that. So the federal government went in through Reconstruction laws and others, said, you know what, anybody can vote in that state, and that includes blacks. And if anyone can get married in that state, that includes blacks. And if anyone can own property in that state, that includes these former slaves. And so that is literally the people giving to Congress by ratifying the 14th Amendment. They gave to the federal government the right to protect the inalienable rights of every individual at the state level as well. So there's a lot of stuff. The other big clause is after it goes through and lists the first 15 enumerated powers, the Constitution then says that Congress has the power to make all laws which will be necessary and proper for carrying into execution the foregoing powers. So whether it be with military or economic or commerce or whatever it is, Congress has the right to make laws in all of those areas, and that can regulate the people in those areas because we the people told Congress they have the right to do that in those 17 areas.
And isn't that really, I mean, that's the proper function of government in the first place. I mean, when you have a society, you're coming together and saying, you know, you have to have some form of government. We don't want government running everything, but you really have to come together and agree there's certain powers we have to give them to protect the rights that God gave us. So it's the government is then naturally going to have some sort of power over you.
Yeah, and that's what we call social compact rights, and that is one of the 4 types of law that exists, and that's something folks have to understand as well, social compact rights.
All right, got to take a quick break. We'll be back for more right here on WallBuilders Live. It's Foundations of Freedom Thursday.
Thomas Jefferson said, "In questions of power, then let no more be heard of confidence in man, but bind him down for mischief by the chains of the Constitution."
This is David Barton with another moment from America's history. At the time of the American Revolution, numerous other nations also had revolutions, yet 200 years later, America is the only of those nations still under its original form of government. Is this just good luck? Not according to founding father Benjamin Rush. He declared, I do not believe that the Constitution was the offspring of inspiration, but I am as perfectly satisfied that it is as much the work of a divine providence as any of the miracles recorded in the Old and New Testament. George Washington agreed. In fact, he declared, I should be pained to believe that the United States have forgotten that divine interposition which was so often manifested during our Revolution, or that they fail to consider the omnipotence of that God who is alone able to protect them. Our founders acknowledged that our national success had come from God.
For more information on God's hand in American history, contact WallBuilders at 1-800-8-REBUILD.
Let the torch of freedom burn.
President Calvin Coolidge said, "The more I study the Constitution, the more I realize that no other document devised by the hand of man has brought so much progress and happiness to humanity. To live under the American Constitution is the greatest political privilege that was ever accorded to the human race."
Welcome back to WallBuilders Live. It's Foundations of Freedom Thursday. We've been talking about the idea of government's power over us. I hate even saying that over us. It's really a power to enforce.
It's government power that we loan them for our benefit, and that's what a social compact is.
Yes, because we want them to enforce the laws that we've agreed upon as a people.
That's right. Those are the areas that we identified that we needed help in, or that we wanted some help in, or that we wanted them to enforce in. It's a lot like a homeowners association. If you move into a community, you have a homeowners association, they say, you know what, we really just want homes that are brick in this area. We do that because we who own the private property in here, and we've got our houses on it, we don't want our houses being burned down by something that catches on fire. And by the way, the resale value is much higher for brick homes. So we're going to empower our homeowners association to be able to make some rules that help govern us. And we'll decide that in this particular neighborhood, since we all own the neighborhood, we don't want you having 14 junk cars in the front yard. And so that's what homeowner associations do. The homeowners themselves, they contracted and created an association that said, for us, right here, these are the rules we want to live by, and we'll let our homeowners association do that. Now, they can always disband that homeowner association. They can come up with something else or something different or nothing at all. They don't have to do that, but if they get into that, that's called a social compact. Now, here's the deal with social compact laws. And by the way, Founding Fathers very, very versed on this. And if you want to find out about social compact laws, and what the founders described is that when you come together, you give up some of your individual rights for corporate security. You have the right to defend yourself. There's nothing that says you have to get together in groups to defend yourself. But we recognize that if we get together and have an army, it's a whole lot better to defend us than if I try to hold off the Russians by myself with whatever guns I got in my closet. So that's a social compact. We come together and say, you know what, I'm going to give up my individual right to total self-defense and share it with groups so that I can have an army. Now, I'm not giving up my right to defend myself, but I'm going to empower another group to help defend me as well. And so that's social compact, and the founder said you're giving up some of your individualness to that group to better protect your own rights. So that's what it's about, and folks who wrote about that would be John Locke and William Blackstone, favorites of the Founding Fathers, Beccaria and Cato. Pufendorf is another philosopher. They read his works on this very much. Hobbes and Grotius and Milton, and there's just a lot of guys the Founding Fathers read on social compact rights. And it basically boils down to this. And by the way, just because it's not in the Constitution of the United States doesn't mean that the state doesn't have a right to legislate on those areas. Because in our state constitutions, we also tell the states there are certain things you can do, like police powers. We want you to build prisons. I'm not going to have a prison in my backyard. So if you find somebody who has stolen, we want you to build prisons and put that person in prison. And by the way, I'm not going to have a court in my living room, so we want you to establish courts to punish people who steal. See, that's social compact. We've taken our individual autonomy and given it to a group, and in this case, it's not the federal, it's the state. So a social compact right is something that we give to a government entity to protect us better. The trick is that so often governments go past that, and they start thinking that I don't have to follow the contract, I don't have to follow the social compact. I think the people need this, and I'm going to do this for them. Well, that's not what we hired you to do. When we hired you, we gave you a contract. It was that Constitution. You do the things that are in that contract and nothing else.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was researching a little bit for a presentation recently and looked at Webster's definition of liberty in 1828, and he goes into this and he talks about the fact, basically, if you're going to live, if you're on an island all by yourself, then you have complete liberty in a state of nature, and you don't have any kind of a social compact. But when you do come together in a society and live with others, it's just like what you just said. It's for our own good to protect those liberties themselves, and if government goes beyond what we've agreed that we wanted government to do, then they're infringing liberty. But if they're enforcing the laws that we've agreed that we want to live under, that's not an infringement of this liberty that we've agreed that we want to live under. So you're right. It's all over the founders' writings, and they make it very clear. We just got to take the time to go study and read those things. Another quick break. We'll be back on Foundations of Freedom Thursday in a moment, right here on WallBuilders Live.
Thomas Jefferson said, "The constitutions of most of our states and of the United States assert that all power is inherent in the people, that they may exercise it by themselves, that is their right and duty, to be at all times armed, and that they are entitled to freedom of person, freedom of religion, freedom of property, and freedom of press."
Have you ever wanted to learn more about the United States Constitution but just felt like, man, the classes are boring, or it's just that old language from 200 years ago, or I don't know where to start? People want to know, but it gets frustrating because you don't know where to look for truth about the Constitution either. Well, we've got a special program for you available now called Constitution Alive with David Barton and Rick Green, and it's actually a teaching done on the Constitution at Independence Hall in the very room where the Constitution was framed. We take you both to Philadelphia, the cradle of liberty, and Independence Hall, and to the WallBuilders Library, where David Barton brings the history to life to teach the original intent of our founding fathers. We call it the Quick Start Guide to the Constitution because in just a few hours through these videos, you will learn the Citizen's Guide to America's Constitution. You'll learn what you need to do to help save our constitutional republic. It's fun, it's entertaining, and it's going to inspire you to do your part to preserve freedom for future generations. It's called Constitution Alive with David Barton and Rick Green. You can find out more information on our website now at wallbuilders.com.
Let the torch of freedom burn.
Samuel Adams said, "The liberties of our country and the freedom of our civil constitution are worth defending against all hazards, and it is our duty to defend them against all attacks."
That is our duty. So really, I guess now we come back to it, David. So if we've put these governments in place, we've given them certain power to do certain things for our own good, then how do we hold them in check to those things and keep it a good government?
Well, this is, you mentioned a really key phrase as we were going to break, and that's that people come together to do something that's good for them. Well, the people have told the government what is good for them. They've defined what is good. The problem becomes when the government says, "Oh, let me define for you what's good for you. I'll tell you what's good. It is good for you to not do this and to do this." That's not what we put in the contract we gave. We gave you a contract and you swore to uphold that contract. That contract starts with we the people. We're the source of all power, and here's what we told you we're loaning power to you to do. And so anytime you get someone in government that is thinking that they're in charge of what's good for you rather than serving you and following the contract you gave them, that's where you want somebody different in office. And that's really the difference between limited government and unlimited government. If you let bureaucrats decide what's good for you, then it's on their opinion. When you have decided what's good for yourself and you've told the people you hire that this is what we know is good for us, then you're limited. You've got a limited government. They will do only what's in the contract and nothing more. So that becomes key, which means you better know your contract. If you haven't read your state constitution, you need to. If you haven't read your U.S. Constitution, you need to. And if they're doing stuff that's not in that contract, then just like in private business, you would drop somebody in a heartbeat if they started violating their contract. You need to do the same thing with civil government, because this is a social compact or a social contract. We've made a contract with these folks to do what we ask them to do, If they don't perform, non-performance is a great reason to break a contract and get somebody else to do it.
So is it true then that the price of freedom is eternal vigilance? You can't just, pay attention in one election cycle, or say you're the founding fathers and you put the Constitution together and you say, hey, we've got a great system we put in place here. Let's go home and enjoy our farms and not pay attention. Or do you have to constantly devote a part of your time to this?
If you were running a business and signed a contract without reading it, that's not very vigilant, and you will get taken to the cleaners on that. Or if you read the contract and then sign it, but then you don't monitor those who are executing the contract. I signed a contract to build a house, and I've got a 2-story house, but they only built me a 1-story house. Well, they didn't do it, but I didn't monitor that. I should have known when I saw the roof going on top of the 1st story that something was wrong. That's my fault for not monitoring the contract. So there's 2 aspects, and it comes back to our eternal vigilance. Number 1, we need to know what's in the contract. Number 2, we've got to watch those we hire to perform the contract and make sure they do. And if they don't, we've got to get new contractors.
There you go. Well, it's our duty. That's what Foundations of Freedom Thursday is all about, finding out what our duty is and getting out there and making sure we preserve that freedom for future generations. Thank you for listening, folks. You've been listening to Foundations of Freedom Thursday here on WallBuilders Live.
President Thomas Jefferson said, "I know no safe depository of the ultimate powers of the society, but the people themselves. And if we think them not enlightened enough to exercise their control with a wholesome discretion, the remedy is not to take it from them, but to inform their discretion by education. This is the true corrective of abuses of constitutional power."
We stand undivided.